This is totally question, maybe totally out of left field. I'm just curious. Is there sort of a de facto, like a not de facto, but like an attitude du jour specific to the industry that you're in terms of, you just talked about like if you want to go commercial, like this is a logical way to go. In so much of biologics and so much of the biopharmaceutical space, biotech,
Yeah.
smaller companies, um, you know, commercialization's like it's either a pipe dream or it's like way down the radar. It's like a lot of stuff's going to happen between now and phase
Yeah.
three. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and some of that stuff we'll be happy to embrace and shop and put up for sale and move it around. Is it the same in cell therapy? We don't cover as many cell therapy companies on the business of biotech as we do antibodies and
Yeah.
ADCs and vaccines and that kind of thing. Is it the same there, or is there more sort of when you look around at the landscape, is there more sort of an attitude like, hey, we've got this very proprietary approach, and we'll talk a little bit more about that transparency of technology and how that kind of juxtaposes with proprietary and differentiated processes. But back to the question, is there sort of this attitude like, hey, a lot of companies want to be a company that sees um, therapeutic candidates through to commercialization, cell
Mm.
therapy,
Mm.
versus just kind of building a business for saleable value.
Yeah. Um, I think I think there's still exploration of what the right business model is
Mm,
for for cell therapies. Um, I think it's I think if there is an accepted wisdom in the space, it's it would be that if you want to be in cell therapy at this point in time, you've got to be all in on cell therapy. You've got to uh, have that in a model that lives and breathes cell therapy, and is not distracted or challenged by other needs. Now, that is possible to do in a large organization. Yeah, I'd say the Kite Gilead relationship is a good example. I'm
mhm.
sure that other companies have managed to work out how to organize themselves to bring that focus on cell therapy. Um, but it also means that there's a large number of companies who have not gone all in on cell therapy yet, in the same way that loads of companies didn't go all in on monoclonal antibodies till the mid noughties, and they are and therefore I think that it's difficult to sort of think about, well, you could just take a cell therapy and put it in your normal business. Whilst for as long as that exists, as long as this requires a sort of unique focus, um, uh, there is an opportunity, I think, for companies like Adaptimmune, like Iovance, like Autolus that are wholly dedicated to cell therapies to say, look, actually, the most important thing to be successful here isn't actually scale. It isn't actually global reach or footprint. The most important thing is specificity, is focus uh, uh, on being a cell therapy company.
Mhm.
And then the other complicating factor that just gets in the way when one thinks about commercializing is if you want the large part of the commercial story or the way that we make these medicines available is in the supply chain. Ultimately, this needs to come out of a hospital, out of a patient, into our facility, get engineered, go through our process, go back. And that is a large piece of the logistics that cell therapy companies are invest in order
Yeah.
to make that successful. And that attaches to the product and it attaches to the BLA. So where you manufacture this sort of is sticky. Now that doesn't mean that you couldn't have somebody commercializing who's separate to the manufacturing, but by and large, those two things being together makes a lot of sense too. So you put it together, and I think both models will work. Sale, and then somebody else does it, but they've got to be committed to cell therapy. And I think it's that's a subset of the biopharma universe that are.
Yeah. All right. I want to jump back to that transparency of technology conversation. You kind of you mentioned that. Did you coin the phrase? Is that yours?
No, old phrase going back to history of science.
Okay. All right. Yeah, but we don't want to equate it directly to commoditization, do we? They're related, but not like parallel.
I think so. I mean, the transparency of technology sort of refers to this sort of interesting phenomenon where the first time people are experimenting, and they're on the sort of edge of knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
then because they don't always understand the parameters that are important, there's a tendency to describe experiments in a way that includes a whole load of extraneous information that over time we realize isn't important. And so, the often used example is if you go back and you read Newton's stuff on light, he goes into great lengths about where he bought his prism from and how he set it up and etc. to split white light into the rainbow. And then within 20 years, everyone was like, got prism, put in light, saw rainbow, and that was the experimental method. And the same thing happens on all these technologies. And I think it then goes along. It does go along with commoditization. It goes along with, well, if you do really understand it, then you can optimize it, then you can reduce it to practice, then anybody can do it.
Yeah. And so that's where I want to explore your thoughts on just for a minute. And I mean, maybe the continuum is so long and stretched out in front of us that it's not like a thing that keeps Adrian Rawcliffe awake at night, right? Like in my simple mind, I see conflict, I guess conflict or friction. There's tension, right? There's tension between the mastery of a quote unquote proprietary skill or technology or approach, and the desire to get to a point where, for the benefit of humanity, these things that we're building are, to your point, buy a prism, put it in the sun, get a rainbow.
Yep.
Do you ever contemplate this tension, or does it not necessarily concern you right now? Because as I said, maybe you and I will be long gone by the time the transparency is so great that or maybe we won't be because of the things that you're working on.
I mean, I think to an extent this is sort of a variation on the theme that the pharma industry sort of lives with all the time. The biopharma industry live with all the time, because essentially what we're talking about isn't that different to what happens with a drug going off patent.
Mm-hmm.
And we live with that, and it's actually part of the culture. In fact, there's a strong argument that says that actually the value that we are contributing to society, yes, we measure that in terms of newly approved launch drugs and the value that we can create from sales. But in reality, from a societal perspective, you're interested in when that drug goes off patent. And I think as an industry, we live with that, and we accept that our job is to bring that forward, understand it well enough to be able to reduce it to practice, get that registered, back that up with data that shows clinical benefit, get it registered, and then be able to monetize that for a period of time, and then it will go off patent, and we should logically accept that it goes off patent, because that's part of the contract we have with society.
We'll mark these words down when T-Celera goes off patent.
We're going
to revisit this with Adrian Rawcliffe and find out how he's feeling about it.
Now, well, I think the challenge with monoclonal antibodies, with these other technologies that have been produced, particularly where the manufacturing process is the product, defines the product.
Mm-hmm.
I think this has been shown to be more challenging. So people there are some people who say there will never be generic cell therapies. And I tend to think that never is a long time. When any eminent scientist tells you that something's impossible, they're almost certainly wrong. Incidentally, it's just a question of time, resources, and if you think about the incentives, if cell therapy is, as I believe, one of the largest opportunities for value creation, then when Humira when Humira was approaching genericization, there are 20 billion reasons why people would like Humira to go generic. I think in the face of that, the industry once said there'll never be generic biopharms. No, there aren't generic biopharms. There are biosimilars. They perform the same function, not exactly the same, but they will over time, I think, make that democratize access to biopharmaceuticals. And the same will be true in some way of cell therapies. I don't have a clear angle on how exactly we need to evolve the regulatory world in order to do that. But I do think that it lies through the same things that I was talking about before, which is a better understanding of the relationship between the product and the manufacturing process and the outcomes. Because if you could know which were the salient features, the critical salient features, then you could define what it would take to produce a product. Maybe it's not exactly the same, because actually every patient's cells are different, but it would be essentially the same product, and then you could define a route through to approvability of that.